this video, we're going to be talking about Aegon III, the 7th Targaryen King of Westeros. This is part of a long series of Targaryen history videos, so if you haven't watched the others, I would watch those first. Aegon III came to the throne in 131 AC after his uncle, Aegon II, died and the terrible Targaryen civil war, the Dance of the Dragons, had ended. In some ways, this was a justification that Rhaenyra was right in her claim on the throne. After all, her son now sat on the throne as king, not Aegon II or his offspring. Unfortunately, the realm was still in chaos. Aegon II had sent for sellswords across the Narrow Sea before his death, and there was always that lingering fear that they one day would return and come back to avenge their king, the late Aegon II. There also was the unchecked Red Kraken, Dalton Greyjoy, pillaging the West Coast and Fair Isle and going crazy, and if you know anything about Greyjoys, their MO is kind of to attack and start doing things when there is weakness in the realm. That's kind of just their MO, what they like to do. So they're having problems with the Red Kraken and his Reavers. And then to top that all off, there is a terrible winter that is there, and it ends up staying for 6 hard years. So all of this is going on, a terrible winter, the Red Kraken is pillaging and reaving, we have the fear of the sellswords, you know, their false spring had occurred and it wasn't there, and then suddenly the winter comes. And then at the same time, the Starks, who they took a really long time to come down, and it's just because they had so far to travel, and they wanted war and fighting, and they weren't going to get it, and then they were upset that they weren't going to be able to punish the people that had opposed Rhaenyra like they hoped. So they were hoping to come down, and the Baratheons, and the Lannisters, and Hightower, and all them, and just kind of smack them around and be like, you were wrong, you are going to be punished for this. And they weren't going to get that. So instead, they start demanding that whoever poisoned Aegon II be held accountable. And I really want to make a video about the honor and the loyalty of the Starks, but if you know something about the Starks, you know that they have crazy, or maybe not so crazy, ideas of loyalty and honor, and some things that you would think wouldn't be on the same scale of killing a king is in their eyes. But basically, this leads to Cregan Stark being the only person in history to hold the office of Hand of the King for one day and then resign. And that one day, Cregan Stark ends up holding trials and executions for 22 men that are believed to have some part in the poisoning of the late King Aegon II. A king that, you know, Lord Stark didn't even support, felt like he was a false king. He still is like, nope, you poisoned them. If you would have taken him out and beaten him in battle, that's one thing, but you poisoned him and that's not cool. So most of the men that end up being held on the trial and being told, you know, you're guilty, they end up taking the black and they go to the Night Watch. 2 of the 22 men choose death. Sir Giles Belgrave and Rawrist the Clubfoot of House Strong. They both say, nope, kill me, I'm not taking the black, I did nothing wrong. And Clubfoot of House Strong dying is kind of a blow to House Strong because he is one of the last of the ancient House Strong. The Sea Snake Lord Corlys Velaryon escapes trial by the convincing of Baela and Rhaena Targaryen, and he is restored to his offices and honors. So they end up sticking their neck out for him, and it's agreed upon. There was also a marriage that had to happen to Cregan Stark of another person, but it's not as important. So after that was done, Cregan Stark resigns, and Aegon III has a long regency from 131 AC to 136 AC, since he's only 11 years old when he comes to the throne. He's presided over by a council of 7. Many of these people would be replaced, resign, die in the 7 years, except for the Grand Maester Munkin. While the Regency ruled, Aegon III was basically just a pawn to their games. He was a very depressed youth. He would go days without talking to anyone. He was always wearing black. His first friend was Gaiman Palehair, and he even ended up turning on Aegon and tried to poison Aegon III after Lord Peake made him the royal whipping boy. So what happened is Gaiman Palehair was the only friend of Aegon III, and then Lord Peake, who was a regent and in the Hand of the King, decided to make him a royal whipping boy, which is someone who suffers the punishments of a royal person, because, you know, you just can't whip Aegon III or another royal person, so you have someone else take those punishments. And then eventually Palehair ends up turning on Aegon III and tries to poison him. Luckily, he would have another joy. His brother, Viserys Targaryen, returns. And if you remember, they were both on the ship abandoned, and the three daughters ended up attacking them, and Aegon III took off on his dragon Stormcloud, and Viserys only had his egg, and he didn't end up escaping. He was taken captive by some princes of Lys, hoping that they would be able to ransom him or make money off of his death. They were hoping for something. But Oakenfist, Aelin Velaryon, the Sea Snake's grandson, ends up rescuing Viserys from Lys, and Viserys is brought back all the way to King's Landing, and he now has a Lys bride, Lara Rogar. Viserys' return was actually a lucky break from Aegon. Not only was Viserys his most and only trusted confidant until his death, but the wife of Viserys, who he brought home with him, Lara Rogar, was from a very wealthy family. But first, let's talk about the regents and how crazy they got, and then we'll discuss how Lady Lara and her family broke that control. A lot of regents were reaching and grabbing for power. In fact, the 6-7 years of the regents' ruling was just constant turmoil because of this. One of the most noble of the regents was the Sea Snake, but he passed only after a year, and a lot of people were sad. There was a week of just people crying and mourning. It was terrible. But the next person on One Peak, Lord of Starpike, Dunstonbury, and Whitegrove, was not a very noble person. He became a regent after one of the first men chosen had passed, and after he became a regent, he became a hand. And he just acquired more and more power. He was placing his family in offices. He attempted to marry his own daughter to Aegon III, but that failed. He just was constantly grasping and doing anything to push people aside that weren't helping him or were standing in his way. Fortunately, Lord Peak had a rival, the grandson of the passed-away Sea Snake, Lord Aelin Velaryon. Lord Aelin later claimed the name Oakenfist after beating back the Stepstones. Lord Peak, still wanting more power, attempts to take the Stepstones, but Lord Aelin Velaryon, Oakenfist, ends up taking his Valyrian fleet and stops him. The other regents, maybe, a little sick of Lord Peak and his power grubbing, praise Oakenfist and reward him, while Lord Peak is fuming. Next, Lord Peak's like, well, you need to take care of the Red Kraken, that guy's going crazy, and he figured that Oakenfist was just gonna fail. And then Oakenfist sails against the Red Kraken and turns it into 6 successful voyages, which gets him even more power. Finally, Lord Peak is humiliated repeatedly and angry that Aegon III wouldn't marry his daughter, so he threatens to resign to the regents, hoping that will make them be like, oh, hey, no, don't stop, we'll do whatever you say. But the regents are like, yeah, cool, get the heck out of here. And they dismiss Lord Peak, and that makes Lord Rowan the new hand. So, lots of fighting, lots of squabbles, basically just a terrible show. So finally, let's get back to Lara. Using her money, the hold of the regents and Lord Pike are finally broken. This leads to a lot of people accusing of controlling the king. There's a lot of upsetness. The regents are kind of being put to the back burner because of her money, and accusations are basically going back and forth. The first to be accused formally was the hand Lord Rowan. He ended up being tortured for information. And then Sir Marston Waters, who now is the Hand of the King, and Lady Laris ends up having Lady Lara's brothers arrested and then tried. And then he also tries to get Lady Lara herself arrested. Aegon III and Viserys refuse to let her go, and they actually hold up in Maegor's Holdfast against Waters and his supporters for 18 days. So this is pretty crazy. Accusations are flying. They want to take away the king's brother's wife. Viserys, Aegon III refuse. They hold up in Maegor's Holdfast against his own hand and their supporters for 18 days. And eventually, Sir Waters comes to his mind and is like, what am I doing? And then he attempts to arrest those that had falsely accused Lord Rowan, the Old Hand, and the Rogars falsely. This results in Sir Flowers killing him instead. So, Sir Waters, the Hand, ends up being killed, and then Munkin has to become the Hand of the King again, and the realm actually ends up settling down. So Lady Lara, using her money, displacing the regents. They're still ruling, but they're not as powerful. Lord Peake is out of the way. Two bad hands, Lord Rowan and Sir Waters, are kind of pushed to the side, and whether they were truly bad or not, we don't know. And Munkin is here, and he's the Hand of the King. He's only for a year, and then a new hand is found, Lord Manderley, when the regents are replaced again. Finally, all this chaos is done. Aegon turns 16, and he dismisses all his regents and his hand. He's like, get out of here, I'm getting new people on my council, I don't need you anymore. He was tired of the entire thing. During his rule, Aegon was known as a broken king. He ended up having 2 wives during his rule. The first was Jaehaera Targaryen, the daughter of Aegon II, and Helaena. They were wed when she was 8, but at 10 years old she threw herself off Maegor's holdfast. And she lived on for about a half hour in agony. Is really terrible. And some believe that Lord Peake had a hand in this. He wanted her dead, his first wife, so that Aegon III could marry his daughter. But it didn't work out for him. Aegon III's second wife was Lady Daenerys Velaryon. She was the daughter of Aegon III's cousin Daeron and cousin of Aelin Oakenfist. She was only 6 when presented before the king. Aegon was 13 at the time, and she just was beautiful. And they eventually would have 2 sons and 3 daughters. Despite any joy he may have had in his wife, brother, children, or ruling the realm, watching his mother be eaten by a dragon left him in a continuous depressed state. He came to hate being touched, yet he still managed to have 5 kids. He locked himself in a room, he would brood for days, he refused to do anything at times, he was cold towards his people, he was so melancholy and he just was so distraught. Despite this coolness, Aegon still was able to deal with Daeron Targaryen pretenders. So everyone thought he died in the War of Tumbleton, but then some came forward claiming to be the youngest brother of Aegon II and saying that he should rule it, but they were always found out to be fakes in the end. Aegon III was also known as Dragon's Bane. 4 dragons were alive at the beginning of his rule, and the last one died during his rule. He hated dragons, he didn't want them around, he never flew on one besides the time he flew on Stormcloud, and eventually he was convinced by his brother Viserys to bring mages from Essos to try to hatch some dragon eggs, but that ended in disaster and just furthered his belief that dragons just need to go. But after a long, joyless rule of 20 years, plus the 6-7 years of regency, Aegon III died of consumption at 36 years old. He's not remembered fondly, he always seemed much older than he was, and people kinda just don't have a great view on him, especially given what his sons end up doing. And the next Targaryen ruler of Westeros is going to be his oldest son, Daeron I, who would come to the throne at 14 years old. So make sure you come back every Sunday when we do a new Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire videos. And besides that, we do new geeky videos every day, so make sure you like and subscribe for more videos.